the Idaho Women's Business Center, and welcome to our kickoff speaker series event for Global Entrepreneurial Week. I am so excited to be able to do this event with Norris. He and I have known each other for a really long time, and he knows that he can send me something that says, hey, I want to do this event, and within an hour it's up and live online. So we've worked really, really well together for a long time. And I could not be more excited to introduce our newest team member at the Idaho Women's Business Center, Doris Zen. She is amazing. She manages half of the state of Idaho, doing counseling and training and workshops for women entrepreneurs that are in those beginning stages as well as along their entrepreneurial path. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Doris.
Thank you, Diane. So we really very excited about this opportunity can co-hosting with the Global Entrepreneurship Week. So we know Global Entrepreneurship Week is a collection of thousands of events, activities, and competitions each November that inspire millions to explore their potential as an entrepreneur while fostering connections and also increasing collaboration within their ecosystem. And Norris Kruger is a leading expert on how entrepreneurs think and how we learn to think entrepreneurially. He is also expert on developing programs and activity to nurture more innovative, creative, and entrepreneurial individuals and communities. Let's welcome Norris Kruger.
Thank you, Doris. By the way, Doris comes to us from doing international trade from Taiwan, and so her mission is to increase Idaho's rather limited exporting capacity. We're excited about that. I want a couple people that I'm really excited to be here. We have Diane is partly my adult supervision. My other adult supervision is Stephen A. Rodriguez, who is head of programming in North America for Techstars. Stephen, could you tell people who've been living under a rock what Techstars is about?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Techstars is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. It started back in 2006 as an accelerator network. Now we have about 50 all over the world. And really, we're just here to kind of help entrepreneurs in different stages, just make sure that we build that entrepreneurial mindset for the most part. So we really want to enable every person on the planet to contribute and benefit from the success of entrepreneurs.
And you know, it would be interesting. We had a guest speaker who was an expert on how to get everybody the ability to start a business. Surprise! And I am so happy I met our guest star here, Victor Hwang, when I got involved with the Kaufman's eShip initiative, which is supporting ecosystem building as a profession, ecosystem builders as professionals. And I'm always excited by people who talk good, but also have a lot of have just insane content to what they're saying. I am so jazzed. I have heard Victor before, but I haven't seen him do this presentation. I think you're in for a huge treat. But I have to do a shameless plug here that Diane and others are going to drop this into the chat, but tonight is Idaho's signature event, which is Crowdfund Idaho Live, which will be a live event this evening, educating people on crowdfunding and some marvelous conversations with some people who've been very wildly successful at it. There are more. This is the first of the GEW Global Speaker Series that Mark Lasad and others put together. I'm very excited, and please, if you want to plug some of your own, drop it in the chat, because this is being recorded. And normally I talk way too much, but if it's a choice between hearing me or hearing Victor, you want to hear Victor. Victor Hwang has a marvelous history. He does have one thing that's worrisome. He's a trained lawyer, but we will not hold that against him because part of his legal history, he used to work with Mystery Science Theater 3000, which excites some of my friends far more than the entrepreneurship stuff. But Victor has been, was a game changer at Kauffman in terms of pushing forward initiatives. And he is now in his first was something called Start Us Up Now, startusupnow.org, which has America's New Business Plan, which is 25 pages of great policy ideas. And now he has gone on to Right to Start, and he's going to tell you about this. So Victor, are you okay if I shut up and say, welcome, Victor?
Thank you, Norris. What an amazing introduction, and thank you to Stephen for helping put this together. All the folks at the Idaho Women's Business Center for this, and the folks involved in Global Entrepreneurship Week across the U.S. and the world. It's so cool to be on the other side. I was at the Kauffman Foundation for a number of years, looking at Global Entrepreneurship Week from the organizer side, but now to be a speaker is actually, to me, it's even a greater privilege, because the people who are involved in executing the work day to day on the ground in the field are actually the ones who are driving the change. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you all for having me. I do have a presentation to walk through, so I'm going to go ahead, and looks like I need to be able to share this screen. Looks like while another screen is up, I can't share my screen, but it's all right. I can talk until we figure that out.
So Norris, you just need to unshare. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the idea that entrepreneurship is the vaccine for our economy. Where there's a lot of talk about vaccines, including today's awesome news from Moderna. By the way, Moderna was created by an amazing set of entrepreneurs, including Bob Langer, one of the most prolific entrepreneurs in the biotech world. I actually met Bob Langer a week ago at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress. So all this stuff is interconnected, and entrepreneurship is a big driver of both the health side of it, but also want to talk about the economic side of it, and why entrepreneurship is so important today, perhaps more important than it's been in any time since arguably since the Great Depression. So, and I would love to also just hear from you guys. So I've got the chat box here open. So as you've got ideas or comments or questions, feel free to jump on in with the chat. I will respond as we go. And one, I guess, send me a chat and just let me know how you're doing, just to say hi, because I know these Zooms can really tire people, and it's great to actually interact. And so how are you doing today? How are you arriving on a Monday? Let me know. All right, now I'll keep going as we're talking. So this is me. As Norris mentioned, I've been in, probably most importantly, I've been involved with his TV show that he's a fan of, Mystery Science Theater, which is an old friend of mine who actually was involved, which is also an amazing entrepreneurial effort. But myself, I actually got into entrepreneurship from a channel where I actually, my parents actually started a business in order to be able to put me through college. I was lucky enough to get into Harvard, and we couldn't afford it. So they had to take out a second mortgage on their home, and they started a business to be able to put me through college. And I'll never forget that, because it was so hard on the family. They put everything on the line, but they actually did it. And the business actually became modestly successful. And then my grandfather was an entrepreneur. He ran a retail store back in southern Taiwan, Doris. So I actually am very familiar with Taiwan and all the entrepreneurial energy of Taiwan today. But I sort of took this spark of entrepreneurial energy, and I actually went to college, and I thought, I'm really interested in this. But when I got to college, I took the first introductory class in economics, and I actually showed up the first day to economics class. And after the first day, I left that class and I didn't go back to it. And one of the reasons was because I felt that the entire way we were taught around how you create prosperity was actually flawed. It actually talked about prosperity creation from 30,000 feet, from abstraction, from a distance. But it didn't account for people like my parents, who were creating value every day, who are actually building businesses to actually try to make things happen. And so I vowed that day, and from my whole life has been around, where does the good life come from? Where does prosperity come from? And what is the role of the people, of individuals that actually create that value? And that's what led me into entrepreneurship, not just in terms of starting businesses, but in terms of looking at it across the whole landscape. So today I'm running an organization called Right to Start, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. Up until the very beginning of this year, I was the head of entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation. The Kauffman Foundation is a philanthropy that's been involved in supporting entrepreneurs for over 2 decades now. And I was the co-author of America's New Business Plan, as Norris mentioned, which is a roadmap policy agenda for how we revive entrepreneurship across the whole country. I've been an entrepreneur several times over in multiple companies. And I've also been an author, a columnist, and a corporate lawyer as well, which I'm still trying to recover from after so many years. So what's happening out there today across the American economy? So this is a quick snapshot of what we're seeing. So as far as we know, there's still 1.2 million businesses shut down. This was from a high of 3.3 million right when the pandemic started, but it's still quite a lot of businesses that have suffered a significant amount. In fact, it's one of the greatest downturns we've had in American history. Certain groups have been hit far worse. Black-owned businesses were shut down 136% higher, and Latino-owned businesses were shut down 28% higher. And from what we can gather now, 60% of these closures may be permanent. So we're actually in a really important moment where so many businesses are shutting down. Meanwhile, we see the stock market doing very well. Large businesses are booming because especially the ones that have digital services or have economies of scale, they can adapt quickly. They've got resources to do it. The ones that are getting hit hardest are the small and the entrepreneurial businesses that actually are struggling to make it through. So Right to Start was birthed out of the idea. It was actually something I saw at Kauffman, which was this gap. Where is the gap in the system? And the gap was we actually don't have a voice for the entrepreneurial economy as a whole. So we know that every issue that matters in American life has some kind of advocacy infrastructure in place. So if you believe in civil liberties, you have the ACLU. If you believe in guns rights, you've got the NRA. But if you believe in entrepreneurship opportunity and you believe in the power of entrepreneurship, like it was for me and my family and everything I know, well, there's really no voice for that. There's no advocacy infrastructure. And the way I look at it is, you've got the right to speech, you've got the right to worship, you've got the right to assemble, but you also have the right to start. It's actually a right that was innate. It's a God-given right. You're given that right at birth. And if you look back on what the original vision of America was, which was never been perfect, but the original vision was everyone's got the right to create and make their own way and build their own idea of value, to pursue their own version of happiness. And that means that you've got the right to start, which is an entrepreneurial right, which if you look back, for instance, the Boston Tea Party in US history was actually an entrepreneur's rebellion. People actually forget how much that was driven by entrepreneurial energy. So we've got this right to start. And so Right to Start as an organization is a campaign, we're a nonpartisan campaign to rebuild the American economy by putting entrepreneurs first, putting them out front and center. Entrepreneurs are already at the front lines of economic recovery. They're the ones that are rebuilding the economy, business by business, customer by customer, product by product, but we don't talk about them enough. They don't have a voice out in the system. And we believe that all Americans deserve this equitable access to entrepreneurial opportunity, and it's a fundamental right. We also know this, and this is research that I know Norris is very intimately familiar with, which is that new firms, entrepreneurs, drive almost all job growth in this country. This is research that, if you've never seen it before, it still packs a punch every time you see it, which is this chart, which is net job creation by firm age. If you look at the top blue line, these are businesses that are younger than 5 years. If you look at the red line, those are businesses that are medium age. And if you look at the gray line, that's businesses that are even older than that. And you can see the job creation is the left y-axis. And over the years, over about 2 decades, it's the new businesses under 5 years that generate almost all the job creation. And if you look at the medium and the older businesses, they actually net zero or net negative in terms of job creation. So we know that if we're looking for jobs, they come from entrepreneurs, they come from the new businesses. And here's an example. So if you remember back a few years, there was a lot of fighting over bringing Amazon's second headquarters to a city. And Amazon's second headquarters promised 50,000 jobs over 5 years. There were 238 cities that were willing to throw billions of dollars at this in terms of incentives and subsidies and tax breaks for Amazon's second headquarters. But as one example, in one city, just in Kansas City, where I'm based right now, in Kansas City, they actually counted it. This is our friends at SourceLink who tracked 84,000 jobs, not just promised, but actually delivered over 5 years from the entrepreneurs. Then you ask, well, why don't we know this? Well, we don't do a good job at counting this. It's actually very hard to count people starting their entrepreneurial initiatives. But in Kansas City, we know the entrepreneurs who don't get these big subsidies and these big tax breaks like Amazon does actually delivered more jobs than a large corporation would. But here's the thing. We know how important entrepreneurs are to the economy, but we've been in a startup slump. That is, things have actually not been good for a long time. So this is over the last 40 some years. If you look at the rate at which we're creating firms, it's that top orange line on the top. That's actually been falling. We're about half the rate of entrepreneurial creation, new firms getting built, that we were at about 4+ decades ago. And if you look at the bottom line, that's the firm closure rate. These are the firms that are actually shutting down. In the US now, there's a big invisible but powerful but important shift, which is we're barely creating enough firms to keep up with the firms that are closing down. So America is actually in this startup slump, which has actually been harming us. We're not creating new firms the way we used to. So Right to Start is starting with the premise that entrepreneurs are the front line of economic recovery. If you're trying to drive job growth, if you're trying to drive GDP, if you're trying to drive economic mobility, if you're trying to drive opportunity, entrepreneurs are the ones that are actually doing the work. But entrepreneurship is a community endeavor. It's something that all of us are part of. It's not just something that sits on the shoulders of those who take the risk to start a business. Everybody is part of this. And we build inclusive, equitable entrepreneurship by changing minds, policies, and communities. That is, it's the way people think. It's the way they tell stories. It's the way they talk about entrepreneurship. It's the way we enact that into policy in our governmental systems. And it's the way we actually drive community change, that everybody is involved. And we do that by connecting the grassroots and the grass tops. So the grass tops are those in leadership positions. They're civic leaders. They're policymakers. They're people that are viewed with influence in society. And then there's the grassroots, which are the entrepreneurs and the people who support them actually driving that change. We have to connect that and actually connect that storyline together. So there's 3 things we're doing in Right to Start: change minds, change policies, and change communities. Within Change Minds, we're looking to elevate entrepreneurship in our nation's conversation. That means get that story told, get it out front. This means influential media. So just in the last few months since we announced in July, we've already been writing monthly columns in Inc. magazine, in Make magazine. We were featured in The Atlantic by James Fallows, one of the great writers in this space. We've been in The Hill and in Bloomberg, and we're starting to drive some major media to start get this story out there. It's a story that needs to be told, but we're also going to do this at the local level as well. Get local op-eds written into local newspapers, get people in communities talking about this work. And then we want to mobilize 100,000 advocates. There are easily 100,000 people who care about this issue that don't know there's a place to go to fight for this issue. So that's what we're trying to do, is to get people to come. And I'll ask you now to be part of this effort. If you go to the Right to Start website, you can sign up. It's free to join the movement. Just put your email address in there, and you are part of the Right to Start movement from off the bat. Change policies. So we're advocating for pro-entrepreneur policies at all levels, federal, state, and local. This is something sometimes you just hear people talk about at the federal level. And then at the local level, people are doing work and trying to drive entrepreneurial activity. But it's actually the synchronization of all these policy-making efforts across all levels of government that really matter. We published a field guide for policymakers. This is a response to what a lot of policymakers told us, which is, hey, just give us bullet points, give us easy things to remember, give us links, give us resources, make it really, really turnkey for us to drive policies. So if you go on the Right to Start website, you can see this field guide for policymakers, which provides really simple things for policymakers to do. And then we've been providing ongoing expertise and resources for over 50 policymakers already, people that actually want to drive this kind of change. We're actually serving as a resource hub for people that are actually trying to make that change. In the community level, we're working to organize, train, and coordinate grassroots ambassadors. We're looking to get over 100 of these in communities across the country. These would be people that are actively in communities, in the cities, actually trying to change the way entrepreneurship is done. So it shouldn't just be the entrepreneurs fighting for their own selves. Entrepreneurs are usually too cash-strapped, too time-strapped to actually have a voice for themselves. We need to actually have people that are in charge and trying to drive this issue. And then we want to engage ordinary Americans in this effort. This is something that everyone should be part of, and we want to have everybody with a voice in. And then we're starting to ask people to host start-warming parties. So just like you have a housewarming party when you buy a new house or move in, have a start-warming party to celebrate your entrepreneur that's launching a new company or a new product line or a new project within a business. Celebrating entrepreneurial activity should be as common as a housewarming party should be. And so that's what we're calling people to do. And we're already finding people are already starting to do this across the country. And so our approach is to create a decentralized ecosystem approach around how you actually connect leaders with those that are actually able to do the work. And so the traditional model of driving change is to have one centralized organization that tries to tell a bunch of folks what to do. But our approach is really different. It's really try to connect and drive and tell stories, get connections going, and actually lift up the entire narrative around entrepreneurship. I mentioned the field guide for policymakers. You can please go to the website and take a look at this. It actually is a great resource because it actually makes it really easy to understand policymaking and links to a lot of the research that's out there and a lot of the things that are available for policymakers to do. I won't go into all the things in the field guide, but these are the basic issues. We have opportunity, which is a level playing field and less red tape. Funding, equal access to the right kind of capital everywhere. Knowledge, specifically driving local learning around increasing support from economic development and workforce training to actually drive entrepreneurial learning and knowledge. And then support systems, healthcare mobility, the ability to take healthcare with you, and debt relief. If you dig into that, they're all there, but there's lots and lots of ideas. We get all these questions all the time, and there's easy resources there for people to learn how to address this, whether it's in your city, your state, your region, or for the whole country. Finally, and I'm going to talk about this one thing. It's a bit of a preview for you as we're about to launch into 2021. And then I'm open to questions and dialogue and would love to hear what you all think after this. But in 2021, we're looking to start a campaign around driving policy. We call this 5% to start. And this is saying that if you take a lot of programs that are supposed to be helping support economic growth and development, most of them actually drive support for large corporations or incumbent businesses, businesses that actually don't need as much help. And so we think about most government contracts go to large businesses because they have incumbency, they know how to work the system, they know how they've been certified, they know how to continue to get government contracts. Workforce training and development, about $34 billion a year goes into workforce training from our government system, but almost all of it is for teaching people to get skills to work in an existing company or specifically larger corporations. And third, economic development. There's about $20 billion in economic development that's spent in this country. And the vast, vast majority of it, almost all of it goes into attracting and retaining large corporations or existing businesses. And so what we're saying is instead of putting all that money dominantly into large corporations, just 5% to start. 5% of government contracts should go to new entrants that have never gotten a government contract before. 5% of workforce training should go towards helping people start their own businesses, not just fill jobs in existing businesses. And 5% of economic development should go towards helping entrepreneurs either start or restart or grow their business. We know from the pandemic, there's so many businesses that have shut down. Let's help those people restart. Let's help people actually drive the jobs that power the rest of the economy. So 5% to start is the new theme. And we're going to start to roll this out next year. And we'd love to have your support. This is something that you can approach your city government, your state government, your county government, or your national government to say, you know, it doesn't have to be 5% of, it doesn't have to be that government contracts are so hard for new entrepreneurs to access. There should be a 5% window open, and there should be a concierge desk to help new entrants actually get into the system. It shouldn't be that, I looked in the state of Missouri, for instance, there's about $100 million of workforce training and $100 million of economic development. The vast, vast majority of it, almost all of it, is for serving larger corporate interests. So let's just get 5% to start. Let's start to break open the door and start to think about how do we actually get these resources into building the entrepreneurial economy. Okay, so that is it from my presentation side, but I'd love to talk with you. Again, if I do anything, it's to get you to sign up for the Right to Start movement. Please go to the website, sign up, and we're thrilled to have you. And I will be happy to take questions and to have a conversation with all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This is like the first one of these I've been where people finished. Actually, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, and then 10 minutes after the hour, they're still going. So I'm excited because there's some amazing people on this call live. Stephen, you had a great question in the chat. Do you want to start us off, my friend?
Sure. I think it goes back to what you mentioned, Victor, about, all these government contracts, like 34 billion for skills building and stuff like that. Is that something that you're saying, hey, for ESOs, tap into that right now because that's available, or that can only be accessed once they flip into this new mindset that you're talking about, this 5% to start?
So like for workforce training, it's actually really hard for that money to go into entrepreneurial support right now. And the way it works is the federal government has what's called the Workforce Investment Opportunity and Innovation Act, called WIOA. And that's probably more than you need to know, but that goes to the states, and from the state level, it goes to these local workforce development boards. The problem now is not that the federal law prohibits this money from going into entrepreneurial support. It's that the system and the architecture of the layers of the policy system prevent it from happening. So a lot of states, for instance, if someone actually creates their own job, starts their own business successfully, instead of takes a job within an existing corporation, that's considered a failure from a state policy perspective, because they don't actually count starting your own business, creating your own job as a success for workforce. Huge variation amongst the 50 states. But by and large, they're stuck. Most of them, the vast majority of them, are stuck in the old world, where they still measure success based on job placement. And we know there's actually a number of folks that are doing this work. So, for instance, our friends in Augusta, Georgia, they actually they created an effort called Make Jobs, and they've been working with the workforce development authorities within the state of Georgia to actually revamp the system. But even they'll say the coding is actually hard to fit, because the codes actually don't track into entrepreneurship. Like, they tend to track into corporate skills as opposed to actually helping people create their own jobs. So these are things that need to be fixed at the state policy level, and at the local level, these boards actually shape where that money goes. They actually have a budgeting process that happens every year. And because the layers of measurement and objectives and goals don't match up, the local money doesn't actually go into the right place. So in the Kansas City Workforce Development Board, for instance, I mentioned them, $13 million a year is spent on workforce development in Kansas City. Very, very, very little of it touches entrepreneurs at all. And that's just one example of one town in one state. You see this problem magnified across the whole country. If you go on the field guide that actually provides some links to places that are doing it, including folks in Georgia, there's folks in Northern Florida, there's folks in the Carolinas that have done things in this, but they're kind of scattered. They're small little projects. What we want to see is a systemic opening, which would unleash easily in the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into entrepreneurial support, if we can actually crack that open.
Oh, Victor, we have not seeing any new questions in the chat, so I will seize the opportunity to sort of follow up on that. So we've got some model examples of people at the city and state level that are successfully doing this.
Yes.
That we can publicize, like Augusta, like.
Yes. In fact, I could even, if you want, I could even open the field guide, and we could actually show you exactly where you can find it.
Well, please be our guest. You're our you're our speaker. We do have some great, but there are some great people out there. We're waiting to. I hope we'll have some questions. Yiping.
Yeah. Oh, I've got some private questions as well. People are sending me. So here's an example. So if you go to State Guide for resources, and then you go to Drive Local Learning, here you go. We've got links that show you around. Here we go. Startup Quest in Florida. Jane Muir and the folks, and those folks there are doing great work. Make Startups in Augusta, Georgia. And they're actually offering their work. They're trying to actually make it available and their learnings and their tools available for other states as well. There was an example in North Carolina called the City Startup Lab REAP program, which is for reentry of former prisoners. And that actually was a useful project. And then Wisconsin actually has a really interesting website for self-employment as well. But those are just some early links. It's not a lot, to be honest. There should be more out there, and there probably are more. We just haven't heard about them. And if you do know of more, please let us know. But there's a lot of resources that could go to entrepreneurs and should go to entrepreneurs that currently don't in workforce training.
Terrific, thank you. I'm looking at Michael and Scott and Mo. We've got some great people on here. Victor, you're getting some private questions. Why don't you speak to those?
Okay. Got a comment from Scott Gillespie, my dear friend from way back before I was at the Kauffman Foundation. 5% to start is a doable entry point. We agree. A lot of places may already do 1% or 2%, but let's get it up to 5%. Consider states buy 3 to 5% for medium and small enterprises and showcase what's made in their state. Yes, I think that's another way to do it. A number of states and certainly the federal government already have set-asides for small businesses, but their definition of small business can be quite large. And what happens is that businesses tend to get entrenched and you get incumbents. And so you could have a small business with 100 employees competing, and you've got businesses with 10 employees trying to actually break into a system. So that's actually where we find the difference, is the ability to open the door to actually bring in new entrants and to move businesses that may have 100 employees, to move them on to actually competing with the larger businesses. So we need to start thinking of procurement as a funnel. It's actually an open system where you're trying to bring in new businesses at the front of the funnel and move them through the system so they can actually start to compete with the bigger businesses. Let's see. Michael Meeks, where do you feel will benefit most in the very broad realm of entrepreneurship? The cutting edge fintech stuff, futuristic innovation, or Main Street stuff? I guess when you say will benefit, I'm not sure if you mean in terms of the broader economy or in terms of the impact by entrepreneurs in sort of driving policy and change. I guess I could speak to both of those. In terms of broader economic impact, this is part of the challenge. Is it's true, most of the economic impact and the job growth comes from the higher growth, more innovative techie businesses. The challenge has been trying to pick which ones are going to be that up at the beginning. So for instance, Hwang, Marion Kauffman, who created the Kauffman Foundation, he built a $6 billion pharmaceutical business, one of the leading innovative firms in the world. But he started by selling health supplements out of the back of his trunk. And so businesses that actually can be really innovative don't always look that way at the front end. I think about Marriott Hotels. Bill Marriott built probably arguably the world's greatest hotel chain, but it started as a family restaurant. So if you were trying to think about how do you build that high growth business and an innovative business, you wouldn't have thought about family restaurants, but that's where it starts. And so what we're trying to do is to open the sense that all businesses today are tech businesses. Like, don't be fooled. Everybody thinks there's tech and there's non-tech, but every business is tech enabled. You can't succeed now without technologies to actually scale your business. But we just don't know what great businesses look like on the front end. So we have to have a wide open funnel to help people through it, to help the new businesses start and grow so they have a chance to succeed, and not be too judgmental about them up front, because that's part of the problem, is when society starts to prejudge businesses before they even have a chance to take hold, then you miss out on things like great biopharmaceutical companies or the world's greatest hotel chains. So I think that's the approach I would take, which is, yes, technology innovation drives growth, especially broader macro prosperity, but every business now is enabled with these things. What's a fintech company? Is it a company that makes the tools for fintech, or is it a retail business that's able to leverage fintech into new business models faster and better than anyone else? I don't know if there's not an easy answer for that anymore. And so we have to be much more open-minded than we've been in the past, as technology becomes much more diffuse as sets of tools for everybody to take advantage of. Let's see, from Jonah Zanke. To what extent do existing entrepreneurial narratives need to be broken down to allow for this type of model to take hold? Are policymakers too focused on unicorns given the prevalence of that narrative? What does a new narrative look like, and how do we help it take hold? Well, it's great. That goes to a little bit about what I was just saying, which is the over focus on prejudging a company as being valuable up front. Some of the greatest, if you track the stories of the greatest unicorns, the vast majority of them had no idea they would be unicorns. If you look at, for instance, Uber, the very beginning of Uber, there are a group of founders and none of them wanted to run the company because none of them actually wanted to be taxi dispatchers, which is what they thought they were going to be. If you look at the start of Twitter, they had no idea what Twitter looks like today was multiple iterations after it started. And so I think trying to judge companies up front is actually problematic. And when we actually start to, from a policy perspective, try to focus on, well, we're only going to build those businesses once we know they're unicorns. Well, once you know they're unicorns, they don't really need that much outside support anymore. They have a lot of people trying to help them once they're starting to hit that traction. But it's getting businesses into the front end, helping them adapt, helping them do better, so they have a chance to actually become unicorns, and to be lifestyle businesses that can actually create jobs just for themselves and their families and put their kids through college is actually really important. So I think the narrative has got to shift from, it's not just helping the accelerated kids in class. It's actually giving all kids a chance to unleash the value that society can benefit from. And so the idea that entrepreneurial opportunity is a fundamental right. It's innate in every single person. And when we don't take advantage of that ability in every single person, society is leaving money on the table. We're actually not taking full advantage of the opportunity that our society can take from everybody, that we can unleash from everybody because of their entrepreneurial abilities. The ability to create, to make, to start, to build, to generate value, to control their economic destinies by doing what they're best at and giving that to the world is actually what we're talking about. So I think that narrative of entrepreneurship as a fundamental right is what we're hoping has a chance to break in, because it starts to involve everybody. It's not just the handful of people that are lucky enough to make it. It's everybody's got a role to play in this.
That's a great point, Victor. Is in the aughts, the SBA were looking at the 660 fastest growing companies in their database. And the average age where they took off with their explosive growth was double digits. That if they're 15 years old and then they suddenly exploded, it's a little hard to keep track of. So, being able to be supportive of everybody in the funnel, because we've had this conversation before. Different kinds of businesses have different contributions to the economy, and we kind of need them all. There's an interesting question from Rose in Brazil. I think she's asking that for each of those three categories, the minds, policies, and creed, what's the most aggravating hurdle in each of those three?
Minds, policies, communities, the most aggravating hurdle. That's a great question. Minds, it's an issue of language. The word entrepreneur is a long word, and now people tend to associate it with technology startups. But if you really think about it, what really is an entrepreneur today? And this is something Norris and I, we've talked about this. What really is an entrepreneur? Is it someone that actually has formally is scaling up a business that you kind of know this business is about to hire lots of people? Is it someone at the very point in which they got an idea? Is it someone at the very point when they hire the first person, when they sell the first product, when they have the first business plan, when they have the first eureka moment sitting in the shower? There's no clear definition, but we don't have a word for that. It's actually the lack of a good word for that makes it hard to actually describe it as an issue. And so I've been talking it more as a rights issue. So by talking about it as a right, it means we don't get put into a bucket. I think part of the challenge with entrepreneurship is it gets put into a bucket. That is, okay, that seems important. Let's create a program and a fund for entrepreneurs. But if you look at the issue of entrepreneurial opportunity, it's spread across everything. It's spread across tax policy, education policy, workforce training, economic development, intellectual property, regulations. The list is on and on and on. Everything touches this aspect because it's not a sub issue or a fringe issue. It's a layer and a lens by which you look at all the economy, the whole nature of how value is created in an economy. And that's part of the challenge, is we don't have the language and the narrative to do that. But that's what we're trying to do now with Right to Start, is to say, it's a right. And if it's a right, that means it touches everything. It's not just a sub issue you put in a box somewhere. It's a fundamental right that cuts across all aspects of our lives and our policy. Most frustrating issue on the policy side is related, which is policymakers tend to put it into a little policy program. Like I can kind of think of endless, states and cities that do this, which is, all right, we know entrepreneurship is nice and important, we'll create a separate line item in the budget for it to build an entrepreneurship fund or to do entrepreneurship support services. And the problem then is that we end up fighting to preserve that budget line year in and year out. We fight like crazy for a budget line, and that budget line is actually peanuts compared to the broader budget system. And so that's a problem because we're treated as kind of like a siloed issue. And so what we're trying to say is for policymakers, this is a lens by which you can look at the entire economy. It's not just a sub issue. If you look at the federal level, for instance, if you talk to people in Congress, if they're unfamiliar with the issue, the first thing they'll say is, well, doesn't the SBA take care of that, the Small Business Administration? And what they don't realize is SBA is just a distinct set of programs. It actually is not something that touches taxes run by Treasury, economic development is run by Commerce, regulation is overseen by GSA and OMB. You think about intellectual property is overseen by Commerce. Research policy is at NSF and NIH and a bunch of other agencies. Procurement is overseen by every agency doing its own procurement. And so if you just think, well, that's something you leave to SBA, you leave out the entire policymaking apparatus, and that's just the federal level. Think of that replicated now at the state and the local levels as well. And then in terms of changing communities, I think the challenge has been that people tend to think of entrepreneurship as something that other people do. And other people, those people are starting a business, like folks on Shark Tank. Well, good luck to them. That's, good for them to do that, as opposed to saying, we're all part of that. Like, we are all part of their success. We are their customers, we're their referrals, we're their vendors, we're their suppliers, we're their friends that just help them out when they need starting to go a business. And so from the community side, the community tends to view entrepreneurs are essentially on their own. And that's a problem. I think we've got to actually change the way we think of entrepreneurship as something that all of us have a vital stake in. Every business that starts in a community, there's research that came out, I think Norris, you sent this to me, that said for every new online business in a community that someone starts, like a home business, the average income of that neighborhood goes up by like $400 a person. And I know that's one data point in all this, and that may be offered by a little bit, but it does indicate that this type of activity has a ripple effect across an entire neighborhood that we cannot ignore. And we haven't thought of it that way before, but it's actually what's happening.
Yeah, I think that was a study done by, of all people, GoDaddy out of Arizona. They just noticed it, so they started tracking that. Michael has a question about the voice. Victor, do you have a distinct voice on Capitol Hill like NFIB? And who is driving, if anyone, this in Congress? Have you made any converts?
Yes. We're lucky. One of the few bright spots in the entrepreneurship policy sector are our friends at the Center for American Entrepreneurship, CAE. They're based in DC. John Deary and his team have built a great organization that is deeply embedded into the policy infrastructure and apparatus of DC. If those of you that follow this closely may have seen that within the last couple years, the Senate and the House at the federal level have created caucuses for entrepreneurship. That is in large part what the Center for American Entrepreneurship helped put together. And so that's a big part of it, because now there's actually a group of federal representatives who are in charge of trying to connect the dots and drive issues within the House and the Senate. Center for American Entrepreneurship, wonderful group. They are, what we have not seen is all the other pieces that surround that. So state and local, grassroots support, major media integration, community activism, all those things haven't been pulled in, but CAE is doing a great job, but they could use help too. They're small, they are like us, they're a startup helping startups, but they're doing great work, but we need to do more. We're nothing on the scale of what NFIB has. NFIB it's the National Federation of Independent Businesses. That is not just for entrepreneurs, that's for all independent businesses, and including businesses that are quite old and quite large as part of that. It would be great to be something like that eventually. I think what we see eventually is actually building up that kind of infrastructure. Someday there should be something like that for the entrepreneurs, people actually fighting for entrepreneurial opportunity, not just for protecting certain segments of small businesses. opening it up much more broadly to involve those that are newbies and startups and those that are trying to grow up from being really, really young into something bigger.
Victor, Doris is being very shy, but she has a question. She had a question.
Hi.
Like, put your hand up. Oh.
Hi, Victor. Thank you very much for share a lot of your experience and create such amazing organization. It's right to start. I think it's very important, change mind, change policy, and change communities. So thank you very much being here. And I have a question as I'm working in IWBC. So I find out one of the biggest barrier I see to the woman start a business is having to take care of their family. So I talk with a lot of stay-home mom and who really would like to do something, start a business while they are watching their small children, but they just can't because they didn't have another support. So do you have any suggestion or there is any incentive or policy who support them to while they are stay-home mom, but they still can start their business?
Yeah, there's some at the local and the state level. There are some states that are trying to experiment with childcare support and benefits, but it is a big problem. I'd say it's one of the biggest problems, which is in the US, you're kind of on your own. Like you've discovered this, like in a lot of other countries and societies, you have extended family often around you. In the US, people don't have that. Which means that childcare becomes even more of a problem than it is in a lot of other places, which holds people back from entrepreneurship. So I think this is a big issue. It's not something that we've seen a lot of progress on at all, but I think it's something that's really important. We need to tackle this because so many women have a hard time starting businesses because of their inability to get childcare. Childcare is hard to get in many places. It's expensive and it's not very dependable. And so I think that's something that we've got to look at and actually drive a lot more support for.
Thank you.
No,
That's
that's
something that we've missed a lot on, the childcare. I don't hear anybody really talking about that. But when Doris asked me that, I went like, oh crap, yeah, that's important. Diane had a question about women entrepreneurs. Diane, you want to ask him?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of also piggyback on Doris's question as well, we are seeing a spike in women new starts that are reaching out to the WBC. I think part of it too is that they're all trying to navigate this homeschool thing. They don't want to go back to their jobs because, and so then they're looking at entrepreneurship. So we have this really almost this funnel, this cycle of women that they want to leave corporate world. They want to start a business in their home. They don't want to go back to their jobs. They've got kids they're trying to homeschool during the day. So we're seeing a huge influx in business starts. So to Doris and Norris's point, I think that we are going to see an influx, but I had asked a question early in the chat. Do you see in your forecasting for 2021 that women will remain the largest group of growing entrepreneurs? And how can we as an ecosystem better support that?
I think it's a huge issue. Women historically have started businesses about half the rate of men, and the businesses grow about half as fast as for men. So it actually has not been a level playing field, and it's something that is starting to shift. And I think you're right. Some of the data from this year just shows a large number of women entering the entrepreneurial markets. I'll give you an example. My wife actually is doing a home tutoring business now, doing online for people that are trying to teach kids online. And I know she's just one example out of millions of stories out there. The kind of things we're talking about at 5% to start actually would open that up. So 5% of economic development support and workforce training support could actually be skills that are fed into women-owned businesses and for other types of underserved markets, people that actually need help. Right now, one of the challenges is like whether you're trying to target different groups that have suffered through race or geography or their background or gender, is they tend to become like separate programs. And then they become a challenge to actually have to fight for over and over again. And so by saying 5% to start, we're saying, millions of dollars in support systems that are currently used for supporting larger organizations can actually flow into supporting women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, rural businesses, urban neighborhoods. Right now, that money just is not there because we just have not prioritized that as a society. And cities and states don't have a lot of budgets now. Their budgets have been killed because of the pandemic. So what we want to do is to actually open that up and actually get that money into the entrepreneurial support organizations like the work you guys are doing, and really start to support those people that need help the most.
We've got some other questions. Has anyone private messaged that? You have any in your queue?
Oh, let's see.
Yeah, it is while we're waiting. Hezron from Kenya. We have Nora from Kosovo. We have some other countries represented. Hezron or Nora, do you have a question?
Yeah. My question is, what programs do you have in place to have right to start as a movement that cuts across the other countries, especially in developing countries in Africa?
We would love this to spread into other countries eventually. We've got our hands full in the U.S. for right now, but we'd love this to grow. And you're welcome to take these ideas and implement them in your own way in your own country. And over time, I'd love to be able to open up future channels and chapters and partners in other countries as well. So I would say feel free to take our ideas and run with them and make them yours in your own country. And over time, we can start to hopefully expand right to start into something that spreads across the whole world.
So Hezron, do you know anyone in Kenya who could take the lead on this?
Yeah, well, of course, the government in Kenya has various programs to support entrepreneurs, but the message has not been properly gotten in terms of how to raise the right to entrepreneurship or to start as a right to health, water, and all that, or education for that matter, which is enshrined in our constitution. So for it to be able to have the right position in the minds of policymakers, it means that we need to have a completely different approach, which then probably could be anchored with the Sustainable Development Goals, and also to focus on the primacy of small enterprises, macro small enterprises in creation of jobs, and how that then right to start complement those global efforts, and how we then start a conversation that has more impact and is measurable.
Oh,
That's
thank
really
you.
my
Thank you,
question.
Karen just.
Because everybody here
Karen-
recognizes the importance of macro small medium enterprises, or small businesses, or macro small for purposes of starting jobs and all that. But the question is, how do you integrate all these various initiatives in a manner that is impactful?
Thank you, Hezron. Karen stole my next question. Karen Gonzalez Flores, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, what do you think is the role of universities or higher education centers in relation with the entrepreneurship ecosystem, like as a networking, as a connector, or they actually have a more action mode involving the entrepreneurship ecosystem?
I think with universities and higher ed, they're really important in the system. And I think the shift that we're talking about with Right to Start is to shift them from thinking of themselves as formal academic training into more embedded within the system itself. So helping people learn entrepreneurial skills as opposed to being, siloed programs. So I've seen this happen in a lot of universities where entrepreneurship is viewed as something separate. And it's something that you have to major in, or it's something that you have to kind of sacrifice other parts of your study to do. And what we're hoping for is that entrepreneurial education becomes something that's taught across the whole academic process. University, and you see this in some campuses where entrepreneurship actually becomes something that all students are exposed to. Even if they don't call it entrepreneurship, they're exposed to design thinking and project-based learning and team collaboration for developing new products and ideas. And you can embed that throughout all the work. And so what we are calling for is to actually help reshape the way education is being done. And so it becomes something that is just viewed as part of normal process of learning, and not something that's a separate thing.
Great
Thank you
fun.
so much.
Are we okay with running overtime a little bit? Anybody complain?
You know, I actually didn't set an end time, so I think as long as, I love all this great conversation, so let's just let it flow till probably about 11:30. I'd love to hear, if there's some other questions in here I'd love to hear.
Well, if people are starting to come out of their shell. Well, Scott asked a really provocative question, and Victor, I'd like you to plant the seed and something we can end with is, he made reference to, moonshots. Putting a person on the moon is sort of, what is your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal that you'd like to see when this, how's this going to end up? But let's get to some, let that percolate, because some of you might have some insights. We have some other questions here. Thank you, Karen, for that great questions. Michael, you've been uncharacteristically shy, except in the chat.
Hey, Victor.
Mo is waving. Mo, do you have a question? You're muted.
Thanks, Victor. Great presentation. I always learn from you guys, and I'm happy to be here. Briefly, I have known Norris for quite some time. I'm in the field of entrepreneurship, mostly trying to do the work you guys are doing in the Middle East, covering all of the region. It has been very tough. But I have a question. In this description that you had in the right to start, I just want to find out if there is any piece that will be the glue to put together all of these different elements.
Did you say you're looking for like a piece, like a written piece, or?
No, I mean, in this, to make sure that the whole, I call it ecosystem, the whole system works towards the same goal. Is there any piece that is the glue, the leader, the catalyst, making sure that all of these parts are moving in the right direction?
You're asking, is there any group that actually helps pull together everything?
Yes,
into
exactly.
a coordinated policy.
Yes.
Well, within this work, there has not traditionally been, and that's actually been something I've been working on for the last decade, has been trying to build, to reinvent the way economies are run by training up and helping tell the story at the local level. So what we found, so for instance, at the Kauffman Foundation, we launched an eShip Summit, and the eShip Summit was a network of people that are basically community builders to help grow entrepreneurial ecosystems. And there's a set of skills, there's practices, there's policies on how to do that. So there's no, I guess my answer is there's no one answer, but we can train a network of thousands and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people across the world to be able to do this in their own communities, in their own cities, in their own countries. And so that skill set on how to do it is available. There's like a number of things. There was a book I wrote a number of years ago called The Rainforest, which is around how you build ecosystems, which is in Arabic. There is a number of, at the Kauffman Foundation, there's a playbook on how you build entrepreneurial ecosystems. It's called the Kauffman Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Playbook. There's a number of books out there. Startup Communities is a new book that just came out. Beyond Collisions is another book that came out recently. But there's no one single answer. I think the answer is that you are the leader you're waiting for. You are the one that has to do it. And you can take these skills and these learnings from other places and these policies from other places and apply it back into your community.
Thank you.
Terrific. Mo, tell them where you're from.
Well, I am originally from Algeria, but I have been living in the US for the past 40 years. I did my MBA here in the US. I am an old man. You are all younger than me. And my background has been, I worked overseas for a long period of time in the area of economic development, spreading all over the Middle East, including Africa. I started being a loan officer, managing projects in Africa and moving up. And to the point where at one point in time, I was doing mostly investment promotion, trade promotion, and so forth. But the experience that I want to bring here is in 2004, I was put in charge of this, the entrepreneurship training program. It was $10 million grant from the US Department to do entrepreneurship training for emerging entrepreneurs from the MENA region. And here at the University of California, San Diego. So I started the program from scratch. When I was hired, I was the only one there and I had to build a team. And so during that 4-year period, we trained over 300 emerging entrepreneurs from the region. Unfortunately, because of funding, and the program was to select and bring young emerging entrepreneurs, which we call change makers, from the MENA region for a 3 weeks training program here in San Diego. It was like mini MBA, mostly delivered by, I tried to stay away from academics, and I hired mostly in the training entrepreneurs that have built enterprises and successful and bring their story to the classroom. That's basically, overall the goal of the program. And since then, I have been involved in this area, trying to do consulting in this area and also getting involved and following what's going on in the MENA region. Unfortunately, some countries are doing much better than some. And I am originally from Algeria, so I'm really trying very hard right now to really help and build a robust ecosystem in Algeria and start the dialogue. It's very difficult what's going on here, because I believe people use concepts they don't understand, and I'm trying as much as I can to reorient the debate in the right direction, just like what you're doing here.
Thank you, Mo. You're starting to break up.
Okay.
We're getting close to sort of wrapping up. Anybody want to jump in with some additional questions? If not, we will
Norris,
put a picture on the grill to answer the BHAG question. So anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, and in global entrepreneurial fashion, I did just see that Karen put that she is a student in Hungary right now. Hezron has said that he is in Nigeria. Put in the chat what state or country you're from. I think that totally is what the whole theme of our GEW week is. So if you don't mind, just put a real quick in the chat, like where you're joining us from. That would be great.
And Stephen had a question. Do you want to ask your question, Stephen?
Sure. So Victor, I mean, I love all this information and I love this direction and this initiative. For conduits like Techstars, Startup Grind, 1 Million Cups, the people who touch the community leaders who touch the masses of entrepreneurs, right? How can we begin to kind of start shifting that mindset in them to hopefully kind of shift across the communities? Is it sharing your page and telling them more about, hey, check this out, or should we do something more focused like sessions? What would you think over the next 3 months, some actionable steps that I can take, or other regional managers or whatever you want to call them, to kind of start shifting that mindset amongst the community leaders in that sense?
That's I think there's a huge opportunity, which is entrepreneurs tend to kind of be heads down in their own business. And what we want to do is to lift them out of that business and say, for a second, look across the landscape of entrepreneurs, that by being an entrepreneur, if you just take a little bit of your time and be a leader on behalf of all entrepreneurs, you can actually make a tremendous difference. And I think if there's anything I'd ask would be, people that are involved in running these types of programs for entrepreneurs find some way to, like a course or a talk or a seminar or workshop that says you are a leader now. You're not just an entrepreneur, you're a leader of the entrepreneurial movement. And what does that look like? What do you have to do to be part of it? And actually give them like certain steps and actions they can take to be active participants in the entrepreneurial movement. And so I think that would be a really useful thing. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do feel like they're part of a movement, but it's very focused on their own business. And I think what we're saying is just a little bit of effort to think about how can their work as an entrepreneur be part of something bigger, and what are the actions and acts they can take. When they're launching a product, invite their state representative or their mayor or their city council person into that product launch. When they're doing an open house, don't just invite your friends. Think about inviting your congressperson to it. They don't think that actually matters, but those things actually do matter a lot. And those are just one simple examples, but you can think of lots of other things to do, which is if you're an entrepreneur, you also have a chance to be an ambassador for 100 other entrepreneurs that you don't know. And there's simple ways you can do that.
Oh, Victor, I like that. Is that I don't know if Dara is still with us. SourceLink published something in the last year of basically anyone can help your entrepreneurial community in an hour. There's something you can do. Dara, do you remember that one?
Yes. I think you're referring to a couple slides that Maria periodically uses, especially for economic developers, where if you only have an hour a week, there's just some quick tips that she suggests. And it's how can you make social connections? How can you introduce an entrepreneur to their next new client? And just knowing even those handful of trusted partners or resources that you can introduce an entrepreneur to. Is that what I'm thinking? That's
is that there's just so many little things, even it's just giving someone encouragement, whether it's making these connections. Most people don't realize how connected they are, that who they know and who they know. We live in this very sort of flat network world where we're a lot more connected, but we may not realize it. But there are so many little things that we can do, from ranging from shopping local to making those introductions. And Victor's point, I want to re-emphasize: you are a leader.
How much time
you are a leader in your community, whether you like it or not.
You could do with that time. Now envision.
I'm sorry, Dara, did I talk over you?
Oh, no. I think someone else came off mute and there was a little background noise. You're good.
Okay. As long as we don't have like dogs barking and all that. Some of you on the call, sort of the last call, last call for this. I'm glad. DT, did you want to jump in? DT is an example of a university-based program that is helping with the city of Rochester. Do you want to chime in? Oh, her mic's not working. Okay. Well,
I saw that Michael was trying to talk earlier.
Michael, jump in.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Victor. So yeah, my message or my question is really around how we change the narrative for the 997 if they're not aware of it. I mean, it sounds like your ambassadors are going to go out there and push and do great things, but are there things we can do to reach those people? I mean, and does it start at the K through 12? Like, where do we start the funnel?
That's a great question. And I would love your thoughts on that too. I think this is something for all of us to tackle, which is how do we actually change the storyline out there? I don't know if there's just one point of entry on this. I think of it as a broader education movement for helping people understand this issue. Mike was talking around the 997, for those of you that don't know this, because it's 3 out of 1,000 people every month that start a business, but the 997 don't feel they have a role. But what we do know is that, and the research backs this up, the role of the 997 have a huge effect on the 3. In fact, the 3 really only succeed when the other 997 are involved in their success. And that's what ecosystems are, is everybody involved. what we're looking at doing next year with Right to Start is actually building out a broader campaign around this issue, around how we get everybody involved. That entrepreneurship is not something that is for other people. It's something that starts with me. It starts with me, my community, what I do. And from buying, instead of buying from chain stores, you buy things from independent retailers. Instead of, treating an entrepreneur as someone left on their own, you actually celebrate them and you actually find ways to help them connect with resources and other opportunities. Instead of thinking of entrepreneurial policy as something that gets taken care of by those other people, you actually realize that you can actually change those types of things by contacting your policymaker. So we're looking at trying to start that, but I'd say we've got a real challenge on our hands. We don't have the answers on how we build this. And it's something that cuts across all these issues. And there were so many great questions that everyone's asked around, well, how do we do this? Whether it's targeting, women-owned businesses or other types of sectors or rural areas or whatever, we don't have all the answers because this is a big effort that takes everybody thinking collectively around how we do this. But if you've got ideas, I'd love to hear them. How do we actually get this message out there, and how do we actually change public opinion? I welcome help and ideas.
And I will confirm that Victor listens, and he actually hears what you're saying, which is maybe that's his lawyer training, but that's very welcome to have that. Gina Kim from LA, you came on camera. You have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. First, Norris, thank you for inviting me. And I don't know why, nothing phases me ever usually, but I'm nervous about talking to Victor because
he is a pretty scary dude.
Yeah, because my partner Monique, who's also on the call, and I have been following his work for like the whole time we started working. This is the scorecard. Rainforest scorecard. So the question I had is throughout just, I was wondering what I could get out of this session. As you're aware, Norris and Victor, my partner Monique and I have been working on finding a way to revamp the education system, K-12. Our theory in action is when we create a system that meets the needs of the most vulnerable students, which is the African-American population, the system will work for all students. And so we started sketching out and meeting with folks and kind of building out our ecosystem, how we could, what we visualize based on a first principles thinking. We broke it down to what areas we need to look at. And we obviously looked at policy. We know policy impacts the system. We looked at the African-American educator pipeline going into the system. We also looked at slightly the technology portion of it, huge with PBL, project-based learning, and relevant curriculum. So we're exploring all of these things, and we started mapping it out, and we have a number of groups, individuals, organizations under our radar for our ecosystem. And when Victor, you talked about the automation, automation of inflow of funds into the system, so you are not scrounging for funds every year. That resonated with me. In Los Angeles, that's where we are located. We used to have something called CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency. And what they did is they did a percent for public arts. For any like big development that went up, a certain portion was dedicated to funding arts to beautify the neighborhood and stuff like that. So they automated that, and they got rid of it when we went into recession. But I can see how setting up a system where the funds are automatically funded, poured into the thing that you wanted to build, that's very helpful. These are some of the things that Monique and I have been talking about in our design of the ecosystem support we wanted to give our folks. We wanted to have a couple layers to our work. First is like as a nonprofit, getting people together, getting them to get better at their craft, learning from each other, et cetera, amplifying and scaling. But the second layer, eventually down the road, I don't know how far down the road, is for us to actually fund these new initiatives and ideas that come out of the group. And I don't know, Monique's a business guru. She's the business Harvard business grad major. I'm just an educator. But we were thinking that having some sort of a way to fund the innovative ideas that come out of the group, that after doing that fill the gaps of what the systems need, and then whatever I'm thinking, my gut says there's a lot of money in technology, and when we fund a venture, then we automatically take a portion of whatever is made created out of that and funneling the funds back into our ecosystem to fund the rest of the work going forward. So like some sort of an automatic circulation of funds. So the one area that we did not explore very much yet is the technology and project-based learning, entrepreneurship portion of our ecosystem. And my question for you, Victor, is, have you seen any successful, however small or large group of people who have entrepreneurs, businesses, project-based learning, through project-based learning, because that's a natural hookup, right, into businesses and learning, where people have been successful in partnering with schools?
Yes, that's great. One, thank you for reading. I really appreciate your supporting all the stuff I've been involved with, and really it means a lot. And I love what you're saying around the recirculation of ideas and resources into this work. The 5% to start idea actually came out of 1% for the arts, which is a movement that people actually talk about, because 1% for the arts is, I know actually Kansas City does it. I know a bunch of cities do 1% for the arts. I think Lincoln, Nebraska does it. And so that idea, how simple that was, and how that becomes like a baseline that you can actually sort of focus on. It becomes easy to rally people around that very simple idea. And I totally hear everything you're saying, and I think you're right. It is a way to recirculate money. It was also inspired by, there's a whole set of initiatives at the federal level called SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, which are grants. It's essentially 2 to 3% of research that the government does has to go into entrepreneurial businesses as well. And that just causes this recycling, and all the research on that program has shown how much power that's had when you have just 2 to 3% that gets put back into entrepreneurial activity. I would say a few thoughts on that. One idea, which I have not thought through at all, but 5% to start, could that apply towards how we think of education? Could 5% to start be 5% of the time that students are in school? At least 5% goes towards entrepreneurial learning of some kind. I think it's probably, on average, probably still way less than 5% right now of a typical school kid's time. And 5% seems so little to ask for. I don't know. I haven't thought through all the challenges of what that looks like in practice, but I put that out there as a possible thing to think about. You're asking around a network of people that are doing this work. Really interesting. There's about to be launched a network as an independent nonprofit, but it's a spin out from a school district in Kansas City. It's called the CAPS Network, CAPS. And it came out of a program from a public high school. This program is called the Center for Applied Professional Studies, CAPS. And they built a network of, now it's over 60 schools that are doing project-based learning, hands-on learning with, they'll bring in large companies, will work with them to have volunteers come and teach students. The students will work on real-world projects as their thesis projects and spin them out. But it's become a hugely successful program. They got 60 schools across the country involved in this network of sharing practices. And they're about to spin that out as an independent nonprofit, actually, relatively soon. And if you're interested, the CAPS network would be, I think, a great ally for what you're talking about. Because I think, as far as I know, and I'm not an expert on K-12 education, but as far as I've heard, they are going to be probably one of the only big networks like this of this type of learning out there in the country. And I think that they're going to be able to carry some political weight and have a strong voice in this kind of work going forward. So the guy that's been involved with this is Corey Mohn, M-O-H-N, and he's very accessible, great guy, and I think that'd be a worthwhile connection for you if you're interested in it.
Okay.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Gina. We're getting sort of close to the witching hour. I'm going to come back to the sort of the not a BHAG, but a BHOG, which is big, hairy, audacious, worthy goal. Scott, you may have seen in the chat, Scott took his swag at that. Is it possible we all pledge to devote 5% of our time to helping entrepreneurs? That's less than an hour a day. Does that make sense? Or what's your vision for the, I don't want to say end game, but how do you know when we're there yet?
Yeah, for those that don't know, BHAG is sort of setting up a big, hairy, audacious goal, something a huge vision for what's possible. In my mind, I think of the moonshot as when the fundamental right to be an entrepreneur, to entrepreneurial opportunity, is so embedded in our lives that it's something we just talk about. It's as common as your right to speech or your right to worship. When people just say, well, that's my right to start. Like, when people know they have a right, you can never take it away again, right? And what we want to do is to have this become so common and articulated that everybody feels they understand, yes, I do have that right. And I think that, to me, is the great vision and the great challenge, which is, will people think of the right to start as commonly as they think of all their other rights that are, given to them when they're born? And I would love to see it, in some point in the future where, you take a public poll and people talk about what are their most important rights, and the right to start is right up there with the right to speech, the right to worship, the right to assemble, and everything else. That would be amazing. And it's possible. Like the right to privacy, for instance, didn't exist. It wasn't written in the Constitution, but now that's recognized as a fundamental right in our lives. And you could think of, the ability to take this and actually make it a real right, constitutionally embedded into the way we think of all policymaking and the way we think of all community building, the way we think of all economic activity. That would be the vision. If you can think of a better way to put it, I'm actually really open to ideas on how to make that more concrete and more articulate. So I'm very open to ideas and suggestions on what else we can do. But to me, that would be it.
Well, it's easy to find Victor on LinkedIn and Twitter and even Facebook. I said he's very open. He may be a national guru, but he does return emails rather brilliantly. So I can see a lot of people, the wheels are turning. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Stephen, for being our adult supervision and dropping links in as needed. Thank you to Doris, even though she had to jump off. Thank you, Diane and Christina at the Idaho Women's Business Center. Dan, could you drop the link in for Crowdfund Idaho one more time for the event tonight? I'm really excited. I mean, I know so many of you are such great champions and wonderful people, and some of you I've now just met, and I'm looking forward to. Let's all stay in touch. And could you all unmute? And let's give Victor a round of applause. This has been bloody marvelous.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks, Norris.
Thank you all.
Anyway,
thank you for being part of this,
Victor,
everybody.
And this is really, this was marvelous stuff. And there will be, even though this will be recorded, there are going to be people kicking themselves because they weren't on this. So, Victor, I'll let you go and let everyone else go. I'm just so happy to have done this. So, take care, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Go help an entrepreneur this week.
Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you, Norris.
Bye-bye.